Welcome back to Jadonna Live, a show where you're both welcome to come as you are and challenged to live like you're trying. Super excited to be back today. If you are new here, you are so welcome. If you have joined before and you are a recurring listener, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, which will be linked in the show notes, of course. And please leave a review of the show wherever you listen. I would greatly appreciate that. I'm trying to get those up. I think I have like 14 5 stars on Spotify, and then I've got like 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, which means I have like I think 15 reviews total, if I can do math correctly, which I probably can't, so don't judge me. But yeah, I would love a couple more of those if possible, especially from you all who have listened and then have returned. Really appreciate that. So I'm excited. I've got a handful of updates. So I finally launched my website, jadonnalive.com. Super excited about it. Worked with an amazing designer and like website constructor. I don't know. What do you call those people? But Leonie. Leonie rocks. If you ever need a recommendation for your website and you're working on it, please let me know. I would be happy to send you her contact information to see if you all would work well together. But I also launched my Substack as well that I will be writing on. Still figuring out like a cadence and the focus and yada yada. But yeah, I'm Jadonna Live everywhere, sometimes with an underscore in between the Jadonna and the Live, but for the most part, no. So yeah, share either my website, this episode, the Substack with someone who you think would really jive with the content. I'm not just looking for like someone to spread the word to everyone they know. Like we all have 1,000 things we're into. But if you know someone who you feel like would resonate with the idea of just showing up when you can, when you have the energy, when you do show up, coming as best you can to be authentically you. If those sorts of ideas really resonate with someone you know, then send them this, because that's what I'm about here. So thanks again. This weekend, so I feel like I am always fatigued. I'm always telling you guys that, so that hasn't changed. But just got back from a pumpkin patch. It's cold out today and rainy, but we still went because we got the right clothes. I remember this dude telling me one time, my mom said, there's no such thing as bad weather. There's just like bad attire, whatever. And that stuck with me. So trying to make sure I have attire for most things I would want to do. And we had a great time while my kid was shivering for a bit. But I wrapped him up in my sweater, then I got to shiver. So it was great. Attended a local wellness retreat this weekend in Indiana, which I never even thought would be an option the way it was. It was super cute. It was at a co-working spot called Numa. And we did a little yoga, a little meditation, some like talks about encouragement and other things. I was only able to go for a few hours, but my bestie Bailey presented, and that was awesome. She's been on the podcast 1,000 times. If you don't know Bailey, she is a licensed mental health counselor and comes on for every solstice or equinox, so every seasonal change. And yeah, had a great time with that. My kid just switched from a crib to a floor bed, which we probably did the switch way too late. He's like 3 in like a month. So that we just haven't been sleeping as well as we're used to, and he hasn't been napping as much as he used to. So that's an adjustment. And he's obsessed with my husband right now, and he's like kind of mean to me. And you may be like, oh, no, it's like rude. And he has historically been an angel, so it's just an adjustment. So we're working on that, but that's been kind of sad. Also went to a bridal shower and still have stuff to do later today. So it's been a pretty busy weekend for me. I try to do like 1 or 2 things max on weekends. And yeah, that didn't happen. So anyway, I'm super excited for today's chat with Pal. I met on TikTok, probably engaged with her content like a year ago. I came across a TikTok series of hers all about Project 2025 when I'd barely heard of it, and it was so helpful. It was so inspiring. It was so just like well packaged. And yeah, we're going to get into that. And before we tune into that, just kind of keep your mind open. It's important to stay in the know politically. There's so much going on. And so I've got an affirmation segment today that will hopefully help encourage you in that and not overwhelm you in that. And outside of that, without further ado, let's get down to business. All right, now it is time for the affirmation segment. For those new to the podcast, I conduct an affirmation segment most episodes, where I invite you to repeat life-giving phrases out loud, ingraining them into your subconscious mind. The goal is to be intentional about who you want to be, where you're going, and I have found affirmations practices aid me in that process, and I've been doing them for a couple of years now. So you are welcome to listen to each affirmation first, and then when I say it a second time, to repeat it out loud with me as I say it. And my purpose for this segment is, again, to just provide hopefully some relief and support with regards to engaging in the political world right now. And yeah, that's what we're doing. So let's go ahead and get our feet planted on the ground. Let's lift our shoulders and just kind of do like a nice full shoulder roll. Let's take a deep breath through our nose, out of our mouths. Again, through our nose, deepest breath you've taken all day. And then again, let's breathe through our nose. Hold this time. Then let's breathe it out. All right, so like I said, feel free to repeat after me if you would so choose. I do not let the political state of the world depress me. I do not let the political state of the world depress me. I am patient with myself when I don't feel like engaging. I am patient with myself when I don't feel like engaging. However, I challenge myself to stay informed. I challenge myself to remain informed. I believe integrity and empathy can rule our nation. I believe integrity and empathy can rule our nation. I choose peace amidst chaos. I choose peace amidst chaos. I weep with those who weep. I weep with those who weep. I do not get consumed by the darkness. I do not get consumed by the darkness. My mind is free of chaos. My mind is free of chaos. My mind is free of hatred. My mind is free of hatred. I choose to love. I choose to love. I choose to fight. I choose to fight. I do have choice amidst the chaos. I do have choice amidst the chaos. And however you typically end a prayer, if you are a prayer, or however you end a session of intention, whether it's an amen or an ashe or a namaste, whatever is culturally appropriate for you, um, feel free to conclude in said way. All right, let's move on, baby. Welcome back to the What Are You Into Lately segment. In this segment, I chat with folks about what they're into lately. And today I've got a super bright, super fun guest joining the pod, Leigh Larson. So Leigh is a native Texan who currently lives in Montana. She is a U.S. Air Force Reserve chaplain candidate veteran and a children's book author, writing about her dog, Professor Huckleberry, which is so cute, adventuring in national parks. Leigh has served in environmental and humanitarian projects overseas and domestically. She was a presidential scholar and Jefferson Scholar at UT Austin and is now writing her master's thesis on super light topic, Christian nationalism and Project 2025. She will continue on into her doctorate following her program, and in her free time, she serves her local Rotary and Junior League, which is a women's leadership organization in those chapters. So welcome, Leigh, to the podcast. Super excited to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited. And I'm glad you're picking up on this topic, Christian nationalism. It's critical. And yes, you're absolutely right. It is, there's nothing light about it.
Nope. I discovered the Leigh Larson on TikTok, I think in like March or April or May, something like that. And what happened was when, Trump got into office, I heard more people discussing Project 2025. I stumbled across Leigh's post discussing her master's studies on the project and was just super captured by how clearly you were able to really break things down in an understandable way. And particularly the parts where you would discuss how what's unfolding right now isn't some secret and is actually very clear and has been clear for a while now. So that's really what I wanted to kind of chat about today, kind of higher level.
Yeah, so I'm glad you found me in March. I'm wondering if you found me after one of my videos went viral over the Vatican's selection of the new Pope, because I felt that had a strong connection to Christian.
I did see that.
Um, so we can talk about that later. But in March, I had a video blow up right after the Pope was elected, and then what was wild, maybe it was April, I don't remember. But the point is as I couldn't ride that wave because this summer I was invited and hosted in Pakistan by a progressive organization there working towards women's rights, and it really helped inform my research on American Christian nationalism, being in an Islamic republic, watching Islamic nationalism, because they both have a lot of similarities, especially with their views on women, other religions. They have racial and language and cultural divisions, and so that was extremely powerful too, to have something so strong to compare it to and come back and be like, "Wow, there's a lot of similarities here between what American Christian nationalists are looking to do and what's being done somewhere else like Pakistan." Um,
Which is so not unsurprising to me, but I feel like folks who hear that may be like, oh, you can't compare us to the Middle East. Like there's like some stigma against like maybe how folks can feel morally versus what they put on folks in other countries, which I don't understand. But as you were saying that, I was like, oh, I'm sure that's an interesting observation for some folks to hear.
yeah, yes, absolutely. It was Yeah, I mean, there this especially with women, with women's education, women's right to vote, like, Pakistan has all of that, they just a lot of people are against it, and I was like, "That's so funny." Pete Hegseth just retweeted that Christian nationalist pastor last week, same vein of thinking that women should be confined to the household. Meanwhile, the Taliban has taken over Afghanistan, and they've banned women being in public without a male escort, and I'm like, "Oh, guys, mayday." Um
Yeah.
so, but yes, and I we're not gonna I don't wanna spend your time talking about Pakistan because that's a whole other different topic, but, certainly Christian nationalism here in the United States is something we should be concerned about, and, um, they've been very bold and clear with their plan with through Project 2025.
And what a perfect segue. So let's start at one. I am familiar with Project 2025 one because various podcasts that I've listened to, also your series was super helpful. Like one day I just clicked on it and just listened to like all the little snippets that you had. And I think that's when I was like, whoa, she's good. Gotta have her.
Mhm.
And so for folks living under a rock, and usually I'm not rude like that, but if you don't know what Project 2025 is at this point, I truly find it harmful and concerning. So I'm assuming you are living under a rock, respectfully. But if you can provide us some context, just kind of like high level to what it really is, that would be super helpful.
Absolutely. So, Project 2025, though it sounds like Area 51 or something sort of conspiracy, is not a conspiracy at all. It is a document. I think this document this time was 900 pages, but for every presidential election year that is created by a coalition of right-winged groups, advocacy groups, and it can range from industry people like oil and gas or, the NRA or weapons manufacturers to hyper conservative Christian evangelical groups that have quite a bit of money. And this group is not new either. It really started with Reagan, Ronald Reagan, as an organized group stemming from the Heritage Foundation with their leader, Jerry Falwell. There was also a second name you might hear in the media, Paul Weyrich, but really the Falwell family. They're still very much involved. I think Jerry has passed, but his son is now taken over, and his son has been embroiled with sex scandals because, surprise, surprise, I feel like they
Weird. That
seem to
never
be
happens.
right. Um, but it's a master plan that is organized by right-wing conservative think tanks that outlines exactly what they want the political administration to do. And again, it started with Ronald Reagan. At Ronald Reagan's time, I want to say it was 3,000 pages, had very little to do with any social causes, but was very much focused on military and government spending. It's where we got trickle down economics from Ronald Reagan. It's not like Ronald Reagan was some, economics, scholar or student. He literally got this document. It's called the Mandate for Leadership. And its nickname is Project Whatever the Year is, because Mandate for Leadership is kind of a mouthful. But I mean, even as early as Ronald Reagan, they were talking about shutting down the police department, sorry, the shutting down the post office, um, cutting American jobs and outsourcing them overseas, cutting taxes for the wealthy and for corporations. And so this sort of thread has been running through since the late 70s and 80s. It has evolved over time based on what's going on in society. And really, in the last probably 20 years or so, it has started to include social policy as well. No, and that's again because of the surge of money coming from evangelical Christian organizations that are part of that coalition.
Ooh, can't wait to kind of dive into that more. Before we do, though, I do want to take a step back, and I was really curious about this. Like, what made you particularly interested in diving into this and dedicating not just the time it'll take to get your master's, but also your doctorate eventually in this too? Like, that's a commitment. It's really heavy stuff. Talk about that.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I initially started in seminary thinking I was going to go be a
Ah,
pastor. And I did serve in the chaplain corps of the Air Force Reserves. For those who are unfamiliar what a chaplain is, it's a minister who's not in a church. So a hospital chaplain, prison chaplain, military chaplain, it's just a minister. Ideally, it should be representative of all faiths. And while I was serving in the military, I just got just absolutely harassed almost daily from Christian evangelical chaplains that were outranked me, telling me that I should be home.
so as you all can see, Lee and I have different outfits today because we had a little bit of a technology issue, but we back. So we're going to go ahead and pick right up where we left off with the interview and super excited about that. So let's get right into it. So as we know, or as some of us know, Project 2025 has various stages. So could you kind of speak to the stages and maybe what we're currently in and what it may look like to folks and how they can kind of keep an eye out for things?
Absolutely. So one way for you to keep an eye out on things, if you want to read the documents you can look up Mandate for Leadership 2025. That's the official name of the document that is nicknamed Project 2025. And you can download that PDF. Now, that PDF is about 900 pages, broken up by chapters and issues and causes. So you can just control F a certain cause that you care about. Could be women's health, could be queer, could be trans, could be education, whatever. Or another very user friendly site that I appreciate is that someone has come up with Project 2025 Observer, like a tracker, where you can type in and you can look at what's been in progress and what's not. That's a website, project2025.observer. Um, so those are two ways that the public can track what's going on, see what's going on, for themselves instead of, simply, like, reacting to headlines. Because I think that exhausts a lot of us, is that we're constantly like, "What?" And it's like, "No, here's the whole plan, here's their strategy, they've laid it out all out in this document," and then someone else was like, "Hey, let's make a user-friendly version of this." Um, so those 2 are excellent. But yes, items like or issues such as, transgender people serving in the military, that was on their Project 2025 list. Um, Eradicating USAID and the Department of Education, those were also on the Project 2025 list. Um, we'll continue to see uh, more things domestically. I know that this week they're talking about burning the flag burning, which has already been protected in the Supreme Court as free speech. Um, but Trump's at it again. This administration is at it again to really foot stomp this sort of sense of nationalism that Project 2025 authors feel is necessary in order to implement a lot of their policies. Their argument is that too many people are teaching this woke, I hate America type messaging. I do not agree with this. I'm just simply conveying what their argument is. Um, that they have lost track of patriotism and the nuclear family and the quote unquote order of things. And they're going to come in and fix it up. Like that's their big vision, is to construct a very patriotic, which I would argue is nationalist, um, hierarchical world where there are clear insiders and outsiders, and that there are those deserving of titles and positions, and that there are those who are not. And a lot of that is racial or religious or gender constructed. There is a heavy emphasis on Christian nationalism, on Christian values. We see that also happening in the United States military, um, about people getting preference or looked over for promotions, whether or not they are Christian or attending their supervisor's Bible study. So certainly this sort of like code, if you will, of do you check all the right boxes in order to fit this mold in which they think is a quote unquote true American?
And by true American, they really mean just someone who, kind of what you've alluded to earlier, won't give them any roadblocks to bringing whatever they want about, um, which is really terrifying. And so, one of the things I love about the TikToks you made earlier on, and when I was on your channel, just kind of going through them back to back to back, was how well you broke down pieces of Project 2025, and we're really trying to de-gaslight, I don't even think that's a phrase, your viewers into understanding that, like, you can understand this. This isn't rocket science. It's just methodical. And can you speak to that a bit? Because I think so many people think, like, oh God, it's way over my head. You just mentioned the 900 pages. Like, who in their right mind is like, oh yeah, that sounds like a nice evening read? People are like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then when you add the political speak and all these other things to it, it's really hard to do that. But I thought you did a great job with that.
So there's so many different components to Project 2025, whether you read the 900-page document or whether you're paying attention to what's going on culturally. Um, it's not so much just a single document, oh, we're going to take over the presidency. It's all encompassing in where it is trying to exert its influence. Like I said, the military, sports, pop culture, music, TV shows, podcasts. Um, as far as it being complicated or not, you're absolutely right that there's a tendency for the overwhelm to occur or that it's too academic. And it's really not. It's the simple explanation is that a group of people think, not even a group, but a large amount of people believe that diversity is too challenging. It is an obstacle to progress and success, and are looking for a uniformed hierarchical way to administer, influence, and direct, particularly the United States. But they do have global aspirations, and a lot of it is conservative Christian, fundamentalist Christian, or hierarchical, um, particularly gender hierarchies, racial hierarchies, etc. As much as 900-page documents can seem very overwhelming, or feeling like you have to track all of this, it's it's not some like hidden secret conspiracy that a very influential number of people want the United States to be a Christian white supremacist patriarchal lands. It's how they've envisioned the United States since its founding. This is their argument. This is how they feel that the United States has been since its founding. We saw that in Manifest Destiny throughout the 1800s when they were raiding and committing genocide on the Native Americans, when they were enslaving African Americans, when they were prohibiting women the right to vote. This is just an extension of it into our modern times. It's the same mentality with a different name, different characters, but it's the same mission. Um, and so in that, like, it's not new. This isn't like, oh, everything was great after the 1960s and then
Mm-hmm.
suddenly someone ruined it. It's like, no, these things just never went away. Um,
I
Go ahead.
only really hear that, I feel like, from white people. It, if I'm being completely frank with you, I don't ever hear that from, at least in the circles I'm in, I don't hear that from black people. Like, oh, post the six, it's like, oh, it's such an interesting, for me, I actually find it to be super scary thought process, because I feel like I hear it a lot from white Democrats.
Mhm.
And knowing how insidious some of this stuff is, and how easy it is for people to kind of just throw their hands up and be like, what all can we do? I'm kind of taking us on a tangent a little bit, but
Go for it.
even when I'm on Instagram and I see, like, my friends or like people I know who are in really liberal circles, who I know are friends with other really liberal people, post on their Insta stories all this stuff about, politics and whatever. I'm like, this is doing nothing. You're preaching to the choir. TikTok is different because you can get into contact. Well, is it? The algorithm kind of feeds you things you already know. Well, but whatever. At least it's deeper education. I feel like Instagram is more like you click and kind of move on. I feel like TikTok, it's just a totally different culture. You're watching like 9-minute clips and you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But I feel like there's so much preaching to the choir happening. It's hard for folks to actually challenge themselves to be like, you know, I do believe this, but where can I actually challenge things?
Mhm.
And it's hard for me to be hopeful
Mhm.
when I need to reflect and consider that.
Right, and to your point, there's all this talk about reconciliation, particularly with whites and blacks or African Americans, but what is there to reconcile when you look at United States history? Like, when was there a time where we were all peaceful? Like, what is reconcile what? But yes, like,
Yeah,
there's so many white Democrats, like, and I went through this years ago before educating and research and probably going down a TikTok wormhole like you just talked about, where I was like, oh my gosh. Um, but yeah, particularly amongst white Democrats, they're like, oh, yep, the 60s and 70s happened. We're all good. It's all good. And it's like, no, it just got more subversive. It just, if anything, it made it harder to identify what is blatant racism, because then now we're starting to talk about like microaggressions or just different forms of
exactly.
harassment that go over so many people's heads because it's not blatant 1960s like people out in the streets getting hurt by police, unless of course it is blatant like we had with
Well,
George Floyd. Like, and then even then they're like, oh no, that's like an isolated, and I'm like, it's not an isolated incident. Like,
mm-mm.
these are ongoing. And so, yes, and that is kind of where I struggle just as a content creator, because I feel like a lot of my audience, especially I'm up in Montana, it's predominantly white population, small population. There, of course, are Hispanics and Native Americans and people of other races, but it's a lot. It's just a lot of white people that live in their world, right? And some of them have never been taught or had a boss or had any sort of authority figure, but either a teacher, a boss, whatever, who was not the same race as them. And so, like, pushing back and being like, actually, like, things are not good. Like, be exposed. Um, Step out of your world a little bit. And it's something I take kind of in my content creation, is just like I feel like a lot of times I am trying to like shake other white people. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
always do the best job of it because of course I have my own bias. I have my own things that I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know that, learning that now."
Yeah.
But it's 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 just like you said, it's scary how people just they don't think outside their existence. Unless they've, like, been exposed directly or, like, pushed it in their face.
Well, that's why I like that you do what you do, and I like that your audience is predominantly white and that you live where you live, because I think it will be the message you're speaking will be more receptive because of that. Like, I really think there's something about folks being really honest and showing up in their in groups, which I feel like is kind of different than what we've been preached, like maybe a decade or so ago. I don't know. I don't have research, but like integrate into these different settings, like make friends that aren't like you, like make sure you get to know people who are different than you. And I feel like I want that and I agree with that. But I feel like in times like this where it is so dire, the situation, if it will be a little quicker for you to be having these conversations with your family members, which arguably the in-group people are the hardest people sometimes to have this conversation with, because they'll feel the most comfortable challenging you, whether it's like, me and my own family, and or you with your own white audience. So I like that, even with the election, so many people saying like, "Oh, I'm Hispanic and my family's voting for Trump." Great. You guys have that conversation because that doesn't I don't need to be telling the Latinx folks what to be doing. Like you guys talk about that just like I'm talking to my
True.
family. Trust
Yes.
me, conversations that we're having about stuff and you guys have it with your family. Like let's now rely on these like trusted relationships, hopefully, outside of our race too, but let's just start somewhere, having it with people who will probably be less likely to overthink or oppose or be as offended by what we're saying so we can get somewhere.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think also it takes a lot of awareness, or education, training, whatever you wanna call it, like, knowing if you are gonna only speak to your group, know what is yours to speak on. Like, for me, like, I identify as heterosexual, I will talk about what harms have been caused to the queer community, but I don't go into queer discourse. It's not mine. Like, it's
Yeah.
like and it's the same when I talk, like, right now with them taking down, slavery information at the Smithsonian and all those slavery exhibits and,
Yeah.
like, being like,
Insane.
Yeah, again, it's this erasure. It's a complete erasure of anything that serves to take away this exceptionalism of the white Christian patriarchy. Um, but, like, it's not my discussion to encroach on anything that is quote unquote "black discourse," but I can be like,
Mhm.
"Hey, the US government and white people, like, not only did they lynch people of color, but they did
Mhm.
horrific, torturous stuff with their bodies. Like, this was
Mhm.
not some clean." And not even that that's okay at all, but I'm saying, like, this like, it was so cruel, and so
Mhm.
it's so cruel that a lot of it's not even in the museum, right? And, or, Native American, but again, it's, like, staying in that, like, box of, like, I can talk about, like, where, quote, unquote, "my people have harmed others," but then that's kind of the line. I don't get into
Yeah.
any and I see and I'll see creators get into that too, like, because they think they're allies, they'll, like, drift into the space of, like, starting to speak for them in other matters, like, whatever this
Yeah.
and you just can't you really do have to walk a line.
Yeah.
Um And so I for any other, people who are hearing this and thinking, "Oh, yeah, I need to talk to my in group," make sure you know what your boundary of talking to your in group is, and that
Mhm.
there's just things that,
Real.
like, there's things, but yeah, I wanna go back to your point too about the in group. How I got into this was just by being an aware person but, I'm in seminary, so that's my graduate program is a Christian-based sort of ministry preparation graduate program, and so when I said I wanna write on Christian nationalism and I really wanna focus on this, I think a lot of Christians should be at the forefront, particularly if you're a minister or a
Mm.
chaplain or whatever, you should be at the forefront of this Christian nationalist conversation because it's like and I don't know, because they have warped and perverted what it means, how we've interpreted, Jesus and Christianity and justice and righteousness and mercy and community and all these things that they have co-opted, wrapped it around the flag, and it's so anti everything of what Jesus came to do. And so my hope is that more people who identify as Christian or have a background in Christianity, even if they're not practicing or whatever,
Mhm.
um, we'll be like, wait a minute, you can't use this incredible figure and the life and ministry of Jesus Christ, who, by the way, was killed by the hands of the state, who was turned in by, religious elite. Like everything about Jesus' story is antithesis of what Trump and Hegseth and Heritage Foundation and all these people were doing. Like Jesus would have protested against these very people, in my interpretation, and,
Mhm.
um, That's that's the most, I guess, pressing thing. Again, going back to your comment about this should be like, who do we talk to about this? I'm like, I want an army of pastors and ministers,
Yeah.
like to be like, this is not at all okay, um, for so many different reasons. So that's my soapbox about
Yeah.
who I think should be at the forefront of the conversation. And of course, like everyone who doesn't identify as Christian, like should also be involved because they don't want a Christian theocracy in the United States. They don't want
Yes.
Christian
That's insane.
laws and rules. Um, but yeah, and it is cool that it's kind of become a common enemy that I hope like more people can. I don't know. I feel like the left can be very divided and have their own infighting, and
Oh
I
my
just
gosh. It's
yes, I just sometimes I'm just like, okay, yes, I know we've got our differences to settle, but like today, like right now, this really big threat is at the door.
it's so interesting because like the left talks so much about, or they critique the right so much for their anti-intellectualism, when sometimes not overthinking encourages you to just do. And I feel like that's the left's issue. We're so busy like cross analyzing what this means compared to this, and like, well, how is this used in this, and then we have to do, it's like you're going to be over there with your highlighter and your post-it notes analyzing and reading your book while your neighbor's house is being burned down. So while you're doing that, and other, the right's just getting strategizing in private, not being messy. Well, they're extremely messy, but like at least coming to conclusions so they can act. We I just, I would like to see more of that, at least publicly. I would like to see more of that. I know it's happening. I know there's like the Working Families Party I've heard about, and like some other parties that are really strategizing kind of in a, like a more localized way. I really admire those, trying to get someone on the podcast to talk about that. But from what we see publicly and what we hear, it's just, it seems to be more chaos.
Absolutely, it adds more chaos. The one comforting thing, if that's what you want to call it, is as someone who like I've studied a lot of movements and protests, whether it's the labor movement or the women's right to vote. That is kind of the his. That's why things change so slowly, is because they're all like the women's rights movement was very fragmented. Um, and I think about that a lot when I was writing a few papers on basically the 1800s leading into 1919, and then of course into the 1960s and the Equal Rights Amendment and Voting Rights Act, like how long it takes to move things just a few inches, even though you'll have these really progressive people, talking points, groups, etc. And it's a lot of it is fracturing over things that are important, but also things that are not getting the original, that aren't dealing with the original problem. And so I think about that a lot when I look at leftist infight. I'm like, we are just going to move we're just going to move inches, and then you're going to keep getting mad because it's not moving far enough. But it's because we keep fragmenting over the smallest things. And but it's also kind of just the course of history and
Yeah.
people, and so I have to remember that like my modern fracturing is not new either. This is how a
Yeah.
lot of this has been going on. So um, but doesn't mean it's any more frustrating, painful, etc.
No, that's a good, just like realistic mindset to have. Um, and it's a little scary because I think as a black person, I'm like, oh God, what generation are things gonna go to shit in? And I don't want to be alive for that. But then I'm like, I don't want my kid to be alive for that. But then I'm like, well, my kid's half white, it'll be way different. But then I'm like, but still, I don't want that to be the case for the black people who aren't even related to me, so for those of us who are chronically online, I see that saying everywhere. Kind of hate myself for using it. And it's so easy to just like flip from video to video about all the BS happening to the point where you're like, well, another day. another day of a, senator being locked in the building because they're not gonna be forced to vote. So you're just like, "La, la, la, okay, moving on." It's like, how would you encourage folks to still pay attention, and not just be bombarded when it seems like everything is just disheartening or overwhelming?
Disheartening, and it's not even that, like, being chronically online, you see every headline about every event that happens, domestic and abroad, but then as you're scrolling, you get 10 takes, so it just reinforces that thing over and over and over. Like, Trump bombing Iran was a good one, like, that's already, like, a very, like, "What?" And then you've got a zillion people that all and so it gets reinforced in your head over and over, and so it is a little you see how echo chambers form, you also see how fatigue forms, like, of people just feeling absolutely powerless, um, and yeah, so I hear you, it can be it can be heavy, and it's scary to think that, like, the Supreme Court at the end of the day is, like, such a huge line of defense and how that's being threatened.
Yeah.
How you can politicize that and have corrupt judges and have it yeah. Um, but
How do
yes.
you stay optimistic? Or are
Um,
you?
both, like, I think it's going to get a lot worse, I think it has to, but I also have this sort of, like, optimism of, like, never the thing I go back to is never in world history have people accomplished so much civil rights inclusivity in, like, such a short amount of time, and no, it's not perfect, let's not, like, at all paint that, but, like, just from the 1960s on, legally speaking, how many people, groups, had rights to participate in democracy, to participate in free worship. I think about that with the Native Americans and the Religious Act of the 1960 76, like, how, we got it's pretty remarkable what the United States was able to do in that the second half of the 20th century, that it feels like we went really fast and
Mm,
then just got, like how do I wanna say this? We steamrolled a lot, and now this is the pushback, but it is going to be extremely hard to remove all of the I mean, it's like generations of people that have been able to open businesses,
yeah,
go to work, college, property, things like that, and again, it's not just United States history, it's world history. When we look at Rome, when we look at England, like and so in that, there's other countries now too that are looking at the United States being like, "You are not the hero on civil rights like you thought you were." Um, plenty of other countries now have freedoms and privileges and, for all their different groups and people, and so it is cool that we seem to, like, break the seal. We moved really fast, really far, and now we're getting pushback, and I'm like, "Yeah, but so many people already got that taste." That's gonna be,
period.
um and so that's what I go back to, is this pushback, we should sort of see it as an expectation, to the progress we did make. It's not perfect, but now, um, you it's what's causing is I mean, I think you might have seen it online, is that people are blatantly agreeing with Nazis or dictatorships or fascism, which counters the whole American experiment of democracy and freedom. So it's like how we're having to twist the other side into claiming that they're or explaining themselves, I think has also been really fascinating might be the word. Um,
Yeah,
but but yeah, and the other thing is, the thing that keeps me optimistic, the same thing that makes me sort of negative or pessimistic or, you know, overly pragmatic about the left and their fracturing, was that the Christian church fractures all the time. Like, that's why we have so many denominations. And so, yes, like, while we might be divided on this side trying to figure out what's next, like, there's crumblings happening on the right and within the church and their power dynamics and their power struggles. Because Christianity, I mean, like, it's it just it gets divided, about what kind of Christianity you're gonna have, and you want this Christian theocracy, okay, what does that mean? Um, so I don't know. I also just think, yeah, that it's not really kinda like what you're saying for your kid and your generation and those that are outside of your family, like, I don't know how much expectation we should put on ourselves to, like, save the world or save the coun or, like, I think we do, and we do everything that we can, but also knowing that this is, like, going to take generations. Um, so not putting a lot of pressure on myself to, like, "save," quote, unquote, "anything or anyone," but just knowing, like, yeah, but we can make it easier for the next generation to build on top of what we built. So,
Yeah. No, kind of going back to what you said about like folks already having a taste of freedom. I mean, I don't know your ethnic heritage, but I think about my ancestors specifically and like folks who had never even seen freedom before, who still had a yearning for and were like, I've never seen anything else, but like this is not the way I'm supposed to live. Let alone folks who have been living their free life and then folks, coming in the powers that be and trying to reverse that. It's like some folks have already been forced through their literal DNA to have resilience that they never even wanted to have to develop. And now you're putting them in a spot where like their bodies kind of already know this inkling of like, oh no, they're trying to put me in this box again. I just feel like it's something, whether it's like Jewish folks, Chinese folk, like there's so many Irish folks, so many ethnicities have been the only word that comes to mind is fucked, but like discriminated so clearly against in their, just by being who they are. It's like, you read books that talk about epigenetics and how like you do not forget in your body what that really feels like. And so I feel I'm like some of these, politicians who just assume that these racial minorities or ethnic minorities will just like bend their knee, which some are, but I really do feel like when it comes down to it, over time, the vast majority of folks, I hope this is not me being like too in the clouds. I am, an Aquarius rising, but I do feel like a a big portion of us will be like, we're not doing that. We're not going back. We don't want to, but we also like in our beings like know what it's like to be there somehow and we'll never ever go back there. Like ever go back there. You mentioned things getting worse before they get better. I I have posted like some TikToks about that and I've just gotten, messages from folks being like, "Okay, thanks for the fear monger and blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Guys, we'll hear it, from Lee the historian, but like this has been what has always been. It always gets worse before it gets better. Try cleaning your house. You have to take everything out of every nook and cranny. It looks insane. Reorganize it, wipe it down with a wipe, spray the walls, and then you can organize and put things back. It's like that is something that is just how the world works. And I think that is a scary reality people don't really want to like acknowledge. But if you acknowledge what's happening right now in our modern day, it's already worse than what it was, like since I've been born. And so it's like, that's already happening. Can you speak to that?
yeah, absolutely, and like you said, whether it's our own experience that since we've been born, things have gotten harder for people, it's gotten worse. We can also you brought up history. We can also look at the fall of Rome, or we can look at events leading up to civil wars and see how there are these. I mean, a lot of people point to the Holocaust. That's another one that's very buzzy right now. But there's all these different events that happen in the buildup to get to major collapses, wars, um, etc. And and I don't know what it would look like when I say it'll get worse. My concern, I think in the last time you and I talked, we talked about how I just got back from Pakistan, where I was doing humanitarian work with a women's organization over there. And what was scary to me was that in Pakistan, at a federal level, women have had rights to own property, go to school, divorce, start a business since the 1950s and 60s. But their culture is so strong that it stigmatizes and shames women for acting on those rights. And I was like, that is such a possible way
Hmm.
that some of this Christian nationalism stuff will happen. Like, you don't even really have to touch the laws if you can just stigmatize certain groups based on your whatever criteria, and that's concerning. So, like, yes, they can continue to chip away at rights or, tank departments like Department of Education or funding like USAID. But also, if you just pour a lot of money into the culture, such as podcasters or influencers, movies, pop stars,
Which is
whatever,
already happening
already
if you're
happening.
paying attention.
Oh, it's huge. And the red pill, hypermasculine podcast, that is a whole demographic that is seeing a lot of money being poured into it. And then you've got the red pill trad wife thing that's going on too. And let's dress it up and make it look as like polished and, yada, yada, yada. I saw, oh man, was it New York Times? But they were doing a bit on the ballerina farm,
Oh
if you're
yeah.
familiar,
Yeah.
and they were talking about, and the headline for it was, "What's the next big status symbol?" And it's having a large family, and it was just like a cowboy and his ballerina farmer wife, and there's something like 6 kids and their farm behind them, and it's like this representation of nostalgia and purity and big family, and it's like, hold on, we wages, inflation, home pricing and inventory, and you're gonna sit here and tell us that, having kids when a lot of us are still drowning in student loans and can't buy our own house and are
Come on.
underpaid, like, it's it's just kinda went off on a tangent, sorry. But my point being is, like, again, without ever really touching the laws, you can run on culture alone. The New York Times having this big spread about how the large family with their homestead is the American dream, and it's, for who? And,
Yeah.
um, um, anyway, but it's those little things that just reinforce, and it's very easy to put people down pipelines to find it that way, especially when the left is being as fractured as it is, to be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, well, I just want something simple. Give me a nice box." And that was
Yeah.
something I wanted to touch on that you said earlier. When I was in the military and I served with Southern Baptist men, and there was a lot of harassment from them and whatnot, I remember distinctly thinking, I don't know if envy is the word, I can't, but, like, I would just listen to them talk in general, and I would think about how easy it must be to be them, like, that they don't stay up late thinking about things.
Oh
They
yeah.
just have this box, and you're in or you're out, and you're going to heaven or you're not, and just do this, and you don't have to think about anything anymore.
Nope.
And, like, there's just, um until, something happens, and then, of course, now you have to start thinking about different people and how but it does it's just a very frustrating thing because you do have the right side that wants their box, that wants their ease, that just like, "I'm gonna do this," and then you have the left that is just, like, overcomplicating, and then somewhere in the middle, we're like, "We just wanna protect the rights that we've all fought for and would like to
Exactly.
keep them. By the way, we weren't even, like, happy with a lot of that. We would have liked to see that be better, right? Um,
Yeah.
so yes, yes, in that thinking, wanting to stay in a box, not wanting to think about any other path or any other perspective because it's just easy. Um, and then, again, going back to you don't really have to change the laws if you can just empower the culture to stigmatize others, and that's scary.
And so let's kind of close with that. So, how, again, I feel like as a Black American, I have been trained to see beyond what I'm told at all times. Even at my own workplace, sitting next to a Black person, someone says something, we turn, we look at each other, we give each other just the glance, which if you read about communication, there's so much discourse surrounding Black, like African American, in our communication that isn't verbal because of what we've gone through and it being a whole thing in itself. If you've never heard that, I encourage you to look it up. But it's like
Yeah.
we kind of have been trained to like protect ourselves by finding allies, clocking them, and then, or identifying them to then clock others when something's awry. And so not everyone has been trained to like not trust what they hear and to not assume that, oh, this person's a Democrat and that's great. So, like, if shit hits the fan, we'll both go to battle, like, with the same intensity. Probably not. There have been people in my own circles, Democratic, very left leaning circles, who I'm like, if shit went down, they would not have my back. Like, I just know it, I know it, I know it. And so, I guess, how would you encourage people to, like, and maybe how do you do it on your own? How do you really pay attention to what isn't said and what may not be super, I was gonna say, like, super obvious, but you're kind of like, okay, I have to kind of train myself to like read between the lines because those TikTok posts, those adjusting culture without really changing a law, that's subtle. And it's really, really, really smart. And you have to, whether it's like something you've learned because you had to survive or something you train yourself to learn, the learning has to happen.
Yes, I wish that there was, like, a book on that. Um, but yeah, I mean, one thing that I hear is, like, blatant generalizations about a community or about a group. Um,
Huge.
like and that's such a simple way that anyone who's quote unquote "new" to questioning, that framework can do. Like, are all immigrants violent criminals? Do they all need to be rounded up in,
Mm-hmm.
like, like, wait a minute, like, just taking, taking these mass generalizations, um being on the lookout too for a lot of God and country jargon that was really big with Ronald Reagan. We're seeing that now with Donald Trump. We saw it with George W. Bush. Um, but funny enough, the evangelical Christians did not think that George Bush was evangelical enough, whereas Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump have like completely fed into it. Um, so there's little things like start questioning, yeah, generalization. Start looking for key words specifically around God and country and patriot. Um, Language is huge, and I'm sure you've been able to do your side eyes or do your glances, and with your community, like just knowing that
Yeah.
there's certain jargon
Mm-hmm.
that are code words for either safety or threats, and um, and being able to push back on that. Um, those are great starting points. Um,
Yeah.
and, or, getting told that, there's just like again, it goes back to generalizations that, um, because there's plenty of Democrat women who think that they wanna be who want to be home with their children.
Yeah.
It's but saying, like, "No, this is what women are for," like,
Yeah.
that's a generalization.
Mm-hmm.
Um so just being on the lookout for generalizations and then God and country.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Leigh, let's go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you so much for your time again for answering a stranger's message about chatting on our podcast. Really appreciate
You've been fantastic. You're a great host, great questions. I'd come back anytime. Thank you for having me.
Oh, well, unfortunately, that will likely be the case because I'm sure, like you said, as things get worse before they get better, sure, we will need to dissect that a little more. Yay. Thank you so much again, Leigh, for being on the podcast today. Really, really good content. And for those of you who are interested, I will have her TikTok, Substack, and website linked in the show notes. And definitely encourage you to check out that specific TikTok series on Project 2025 that she has that really helped me find her in the first place. So we will have another episode out soon. And until then, take it easy. Breathe deeply and keep doing what you do. I will catch you next time. Same place, same vibe. Bye.